I'm Elizabeth. I work at the Smithsonian American Art Museum and Renwick Galleries as a teacher programs coordinator. And what that means is that I am working together with teachers both near and far on how to incorporate art into their classroom practice. So for a number of you, you mentioned that you're literature teachers or history teachers. I would be a point of contact for how do we incorporate artwork into that. But we also use the artwork as a point of inspiration for studio artists. And it's a wonderful opportunity to think in a really transdisciplinary style. Sorry, I'm just going to make a note here. And yeah, there we go. As we go, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to invite you to share ideas in the chat box. So we're going to be going there for our primary point of interaction with you all. What I will mention is that at points, because there are two facilitators and Laura is going to introduce herself in a second, it may be that we are talking to one another in answer to one another's questions. If that bothers you because it gets in the way of your own thinking, you don't have to listen to us. Our intention there is just to give those of you who might need a minute to think, that minute to think, or also for those moments of people feeling shy, especially in such auspicious company, that the silence is already filled and it might jumpstart your thinking. So that's why we'll probably do that here and there. Laura, now that I've yammered on and on, what would you like to share?
My name's Laura Hoffman. I am the LUNDER Conservation Center Program Manager at Smithsonian American Art Museum. Just so you know, I went ahead and muted everyone and turned off everyone's video. So we do want this to be highly interactive, but we are both, because we have the luxury of the two of us, we're both monitoring the chat box very much. So please keep chatting with us. So just to get started here, you can go on to the next slide. I wanted to talk a little bit about LUNDER Conservation Center. So looking at this here, we're a very special conservation center. You might notice there's something different about this conservation center than other ones right off the bat. Oh, someone can't see the slides.
That's curious. Would anyone else let us know in the chat box before we get going? Can you not see the slides? Okay, Sarah can see them. Oh, geez, look at this mix. This is an interesting mix.
Interesting.
So for Diana and for Kate, would you be willing to share in the box? In the chat box, are you joining us by phone or are you joining us by laptop?
Computer, okay.
Thank you for joining. Thank you for sticking with us, HP admin. Online from New Zealand. All right, so here's a wonder. I am not your most tech savvy person, but my go-to is always turn it off and turn it back on, because that's what our IT people always say. So I wonder, as Laura talks, Kate, would you be willing to log out and then log back in, and I'll make sure that you get back in? So we'll work on that. Laura, you keep going. Anybody who's having trouble seeing the slides, if you'll try logging out and come back in, I'll make sure to watch the waiting room. And Lori, I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for letting us know that's who HP admin is.
We're wondering who that was. I thought maybe Hewlett Packard. I was like, whoa, big time. Okay, so for those who can see, what are you noticing about these labs that are a little bit different? You can just put in the chat box. Interactive, yeah. So the big thing, it's meant to be observed. Exactly. So we have glass walls throughout the whole thing. So LUNDER Conservation Center was actually the first fully visible art conservation lab on permanent display in an art museum. So we're all about visibility, and you know, normally that means a lot of in-person programs, but that also stretches out being visible, meaning online as well, which is why I was so thrilled to work with Elizabeth and start offering more digital programs, because we love working with teachers, students, the public, and talking about what art conservation is. And so actually, Elizabeth, if you could advance to the next slide, I just want to start off by saying, What comes to mind when you hear the term art conservation? Now, I'm specifically looking at those who are not familiar with art conservation. So let's see here. Oh, good. Kate can now see the slides. Restoring of art, preserving for future, keeping art in good shape, keeping originals in good shape, cleaning. Okay, wonderful. So this is great. I like to, just in a very high level, talk about art conservation, like to think about it as preserving the artwork. Someone said it very clearly, not just for today, but for future generations. So we're always thinking about that balance there. And I often like to refer to our conservators as art doctors. So we can kind of look and see some of the reasons behind. So looking at this picture that we have up now, what are you noticing? This is, imagine you're in the Lunder Conservation Center, you're looking at the paper lab, you're observing our paper conservator, Kate Maynor. What do you see in this picture here?
Laura, I'm noticing how clean this space is.
Yes, and that is the thing.
It's pristine.
Paper labs are always the cleanest labs. And I don't know if it just happens to attract for certain types of conservators, but it is pristine. Like, this is probably a very messy picture in Kate's eyes, but it is by far the cleanest lab. Okay, so giving a picture of bath, protective gloves. Some of you guys are wondering if it's developing a photograph. So actually, if you look closely, it's a little hard to tell sometimes looking on the screen. This is actually a print, so it's not a photograph. And so she is in fact doing a water bath as a method to clean. Now, we like to refer that the conservators, when they go to school, they have to study the three-legged stool. So it's 3 subject matters that are equally balanced. Do you want to guess which subject areas they have to study in school? Art, history.
Oh my gosh, look at that.
This is like the fastest that's
ever. Boom, boom, boom.
Those are all 3 it. So you need to understand the chemistry, right? In this example, Kate had to know the chemistry of what was on that print, what kind of ink, to know that it was not soluble with water. Imagine if she had a watercolor and she did a water bath. What would happen to that watercolor? It's not going to be preserved in the future, right? So being able to understand the materials and the chemistry is really, really important. And that also is where I like to insert the don't try this at home. Do not do a water bath on your paper materials. It will not end well unless you're a trained conservator. But then you also have the art, right? You have to have the studio art, the hands skills, because you are treating the artwork. You can see she is wearing those protective gloves that you guys noticed. And then you also need to understand the history, the context, right? Who is the artist? What type of materials were available at that time? So they all really do go hand in hand. Could you go into the next slide? Let's look another. Sounds like something a 6-year-old try. Yes, don't do water baths at all. I mean, it's fun if it's an experiment, but nothing of value, I would say. So looking at this artwork here, what are we noticing about this cleaning technique? Oh, someone asked art history or history in general. It's a little bit of both, right? It depends. So I also like to refer to our conservators as art doctors, because while they have all these specific ways and methods of going about their work, they're looking at each artwork like a specific patient, right? And what is needed for that. So for looking at the history and the context, sometimes that is a more art historical approach. But for other times, it really is not just the art history, it's also the broader history of what was going on in that time frame. So often with conservation, you'll hear me say in these like 60 minutes and above, it depends. And that's really, you know, like doctors as well, it really depends on the circumstances. Okay, so looking here, you're noticing meticulous details, paying close attention. Yes, so this is our paintings conservator. This is Gwen Manthe. She's working on a painting here, and you can see she's using, it looks like a cotton swab. They actually make their own cotton swabs because they go through. This is a very small section of a painting. So you can see how meticulous. She's wearing these little magnifying glasses. They're called optivisors. And she, again, is looking at the chemistry behind it in order to just remove the top layer of grime without at all affecting the paint layer below it. So that's another cleaning example. Let's go to the next slide. So now we're looking at objects and what's going on in this picture. It looks like a manicure. That was my first thought too. Absolutely. It does look like a manicure. And it's funny because conservators, you know, we're such a small field that they often do utilize tools from different fields. I don't know if they use any manicure tools, but they do use, like, this is a tiny, they use tiny tweezers, they use dental tools, they'll use scalpels that surgeons will use. So they really will take from these different fields. Oh, you do use file, of course, files are used all the time. Okay, so yes, she's making a part to replace the missing one. So you can see the hand is a different color. So actually the hand, the original hand had come off of this sculpture. So this is an example of a restorative aspect. So restoration within this kind of broader conservation term, in which it was affecting how you as a visitor would interpret this work with having the hand be removed. So again, she's putting on and handcrafted. This is where the art, studio art, really comes into play, because she was studying the original in order to make this informed decision. All right, can you go on to the next slide? So another reason that I like to compare our conservators to art doctors is because they even have a code of ethics that is similar to doctors as well. Just looking at this, this is a very small excerpt. This comes from the American Institute of Conservation. You can see we have the link below here for the full code of ethics if you really want to read them all. But just looking at some of, zooming out to see some of these bigger terms covered. So they're talking about the highest possible standards, informed respect for the cultural property. So again, thinking about this artwork as parts of our cultural heritage, and this is why we preserve them. Thinking about selecting materials that do not adversely affect that property. So basically with that, we're talking about conservators, when they're treating, are not thinking about a treatment as a permanent fixture, right? Our methods, the technology, it keeps getting better and better. So they're thinking about a treatment, again, it depends on the artwork, but let's say around 75 years. So they're trying to think about what are the best materials to be used now, and can it be reversed later if better materials are used? And so for that, the last part is documentation, because let's say, again, if they're lucky enough to get 75 years out of a treatment, they would need to make sure that they're probably not going to be the same conservators working on it, documenting so that anyone who's working on this artwork clearly knows exactly what has been done is really, really important. Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. So talking about the reversibility and everything, are there questions about this? This is going to be kind of a running theme that we're going to be digging into. So I just want to give a kind of broad zoom out before we start zooming in. Yes, exactly. So, and going into, we're not going to really focus on the differences of restoration and conservation. There's so much to cover. We're really thinking about the ethical implications of conservators and why we do what we do.
So what a beautiful build, right? So when we start to think about art doctors, why do we have a code of ethics? And so we're kind of spiraling wider and wider, right? So what you see on the slide are our goals for today. We're going to come away from this hopefully understanding that a code of ethics, such as the one the art conservators adhere to, protects cultural inheritance while also guiding and constraining their actions. So recognizing that when we are looking at ethics of any kind, we are both getting guidance and also bumpers. So we're not just going off wildly in every direction. The questions that we'll be exploring together today are, as you see, very large. So the intention is that if you came here for conservation and hard science, you're going to get it, but you're also going to get a kind of a dive into what are the implications ethically of science, but then widening ever further out and starting to think about generally, how do you determine what the best course of action might be, especially if that course of action can't be undone? And then examining for ourselves, what is our own personal set of criteria for when we decide our decision is informed and we take that next step. So I hope you can find some, however tenuous, connections to the content that you teach. So before we go deeper and further away from this particular beautiful sketch, which I made, I wanted to invite you to go back to the sketch if you were able to do it. On the cover slide, if you joined us later, was the image that you see at the very top. So this imagined artwork that got stained. And I invited people who came early to just sketch in what they thought was underneath that stain. So for those of you who did this activity, would you please look at your sketch of what you hypothesized might be under that stain and compare it to the middle image, so the one that is an unstained, undamaged version. What do you notice when you compare your sketch to the original? Just maybe one or two ideas in the chat box. When we've done this with teachers in person, a lot of them mentioned, oh, I didn't know what that like dangly thing was at the bottom. I didn't know there was a person there. Kate's mentioned yours didn't have trees. Sarah didn't have a door. We have like different focus, right? So if you don't know what's under there, your focus might be directed by what's important to you in a house. Sujin, I've just lost your note. There we go. What else? I'm zooming through. So another person missing a door. Gail's thinking about the process that she followed, trying to connect the dots and lines. Erilda, there we go. Is it a question? Is it the same drawing, or you've managed to create the same drawing, which is amazing if you did. I'm so glad. So yeah, so we see that if we just start to fill in what we imagine is underneath that stain, we might get something different than what the artist originally intended. What I'll offer you is, okay, well, what some resources, when we've posed this to teachers in the past and said, how would you know if you did a good job restoring the artwork? They said, well, I would go find the real house and compare the sketch to the real house. So the real house is at the bottom. At the bottom is the house that I grew up in Arlington, Virginia. This photograph is a Google Earth photo, which was taken maybe 2 years ago. The image at in the middle is the way that I remember the house. Because when I lived there, there were apple trees in the front yard, there were peach trees in the side yard, there were rose bushes planted all along the sidewalk, okay? So if then you go to, Google Earth and the image you get is the one at the bottom, what would you do? What ethical concerns would be raised for you as somebody trying to fill in the blank of this picture? Would you pop some ideas in the chat box? What ethical concerns would be raised for you if you're just trying to fill in that box? And Emily, you could tell it was an Arlington house. I love Arlington houses. For those of you who are in different parts of the country, Sears Roebuck had a monopoly on kit houses where you could buy a house and have it delivered on a train and then assembled on site. And so this was a kit house through the Sears Roebuck catalog. Sarah's mentioning considering the period of the drawing. So thinking about this from a historical standpoint, what do you need to know about that period in time? Deborah is doubling down on that idea, respecting the time that the original was made. Kara is recognizing that by infilling something that was or wasn't there, you're really changing what the way the artist's message is received in a way that might not have reflected the artist's intention. David is thinking about how the addition of some perhaps architectural detail or the removal of that might change the perceived class of the family living in that space. Look at the photo of the object before it got damaged. I love this. So this is a wonderful idea. This underscores the importance of documentation, as Laura mentioned before. You risk falsifying the true object and making it into something that it's not. Sujin is asking a question that's going to this idea of chemistry, right? How did the stain come about? You would want to know what is the composition of that stain before you take any particular action. So we have all these different ways of recognizing. We would need to ask some questions. We would need to start thinking about informed decision making. How would we know that we have enough information to take an action with an artwork as it's presented to us, perhaps as faux conservators? And to follow down this line a little bit further and to consider why it's pretty important to go slowly and think carefully, we're going to take a look at an artwork that is in our gallery and gets a lot of attention. And I'm going to invite you into kind of a storytelling space as a starting point here. Would you look all over this artwork, which is three-dimensional, it's life-sized. Capture in your mind all those little details. And then based on the things that you see, write one sentence that captures what you think this lady's life is like. So as impossible as it is, try to tell me what this lady's life is like in just one sentence. And then support it with things that you see. So not just what you think, but justify or provide supporting evidence. Why do you say what you say? What detail in the artwork is telling you that story? What happens when you let go in middle age? And yeah, okay, and an inevitability of some kind. Okay, great. We have an idea she's maybe both lonely and busy. So what details would support? So what do you see in the artwork that's telling you that story? David says the lady in the diner never grows tired of her regular meals, but she does wonder if there's more to life. Whew, this is an existential crisis artwork. Kate's noticing those clothing bags, routine and going through the steps. We're noticing that there's a lot of food and bags around her. So when we start to put those things together, we start to think about consumption. Somebody has noticed how worn out the shoes are and the bag seems to be dirty. So this maybe contributes to that idea of loneliness. Sarah's noticing a particular time stamp on those details, the 1970s. Kimberly's thinking maybe she's had a difficult day and she needed a break. The bag and purse are evidence of shopping. Her hair is all messed up. She's multitasking, right? So she's got these documents, something on the table. If we could walk up to her, which you can in the gallery, you would see that it is a TV guide and a National Enquirer, so kind of a gossip rag. Sarah is saying there's not another chair for somebody to sit in, so we're noticing the absence of something there. And she's pleasure eating. So I love this idea. There's this tension between, is this pleasure eating or eating her feelings? So we could tell very different stories about her based on just that detail of ice cream in front of her. Okay, so we have a woman that we can tell a lot of stories about. Casey's noticing some bruises on her legs. Thinking about the dirty bag from use. So if we put bruising and a dirty bag together and this facial expression, maybe she's afraid. And it's so interesting to me that a lot of people are coming up with this idea of something about this feels very routine. So I'm noticing obsession, but also coming every day. Maybe she's not a bag lady because she has other possessions. Typical, but and every day. There's a watch on her wrist. So we could spend a lot of time just finding all of these details. And the beautiful thing that you're doing right now is you're noting down all of these details, and we're recognizing that when we put them all together, they tell a particular story. So I'm going to share with you a little more detail, and we'll see what happens to the story that we tell. So as we get closer, if you were in the museum and you could get closer, you might see the details that are appearing on the screen. This is another view of that same bag. went a little too far. Forgive me, imagine that you didn't see that. So now that you see those details more closely, so now that you see the dropped hem on the interior of her shirt sleeve, now that you see this bag from another angle, now that you see the state of her shoes and her purse, has anything in your story changed? Or what, alternatively, what does it add to your story? Stephanie previously had said her shoes and purse are worn. She seems like a working woman. There's maybe dirt on her face and her hair is not done up. Her dirty bag looks like she's put it down multiple times. She might live in an area with stores close together and she walks to and from those stores. So thinking about how did it come to be that she is wearing these flat shoes with this shopping bag? How did this shopping bag manage to get into the state that it's in? What more can you add to your story based on these tiny details as you get so close to her and you see that her shoelace is untied, that her purse has tape on it, that this bag has stains and wrinkles? Sujin is adding, maybe she seems like a runaway. So what an interesting thing to think of an adult as a runaway. What are you noticing, Laura?
What more am I noticing? Has anyone noticed what she's been eating?
We heard a bit about ice cream.
Because that's where my eye always goes for.
Or she's a famous person in disguise. I love this. Casey is adding it. Yes, you got it. It's a banana split. So yeah, we've got quite a good deal of ice cream in that dish. We've got a green bottle. Is it beer? It's 7-Up, if I'm remembering. Is that correct? Okay, so we 7-Up. We've got a diner. Sarah's saying she seems neglected by herself and perhaps also by society. Maybe she has health issues. Deborah's saying she's taking a break from work where she has to stand all day. And she's planning her relaxation, right? So we have this TV guide. Okay. Thank you. This is a thing that comes up often with students. There's a question often about this person's gender. And I know that the artist called it woman eating, but I think you raise a really good question. And Sujin doubles down. She says, yeah, you might be right. So the reason that I'm kind of digging into this idea of these tiny details is that the artist didn't mean all these tiny details. So when this artwork was made, it was made quite a long time ago with objects from real life. So what the artist would do is he would go out into the world and find real paper bags from real stores. He would find real National Enquirers from the grocery store rack. You know, all of these different objects that lived a life, and he would put them together. He'd mass them together in these works. And then he would cast the bodies of his friends. So these are life-sized artworks made of, is it a plasticine? Am I remembering that correctly, Laura? And so he's choosing this material that intends to be maximally lifelike, using things from real life. What happens though over time, especially when things are not made to last, is that their visage changes, right? So just like we, over the lifetimes that we live, our visages change, so too did the visage of this bag. So what you see on the screen in front of you on the left side is what was before a conservator's work. And on the right side is what came after. And Ms. Long is saying it's a night and day difference. I agree, right? So when we look, for instance, at, well, what's the thing that's catching you most? What's changed most? Will you add a thought in the chat box? The wig. Ah, the lighting, the bag, right? Her hair seems less disheveled. The bag moved. Maybe it's a new paper bag. Could that be the warm lighting? So right. So now we're starting to think about all those small details that we were lingering on before. Those small details, some of them have shifted and changed. It feels different. It feels less disheveled. The straight lines on this bag tell a very different inventory than the crumpled and stained bag did before. And that bag actually is exactly the same bag. The conservator spent a lot of time carefully unpacking the bag, which is filled with a box of noodles, with a bag of dog food, all of these different things, before the bag of dog food had fallen so deeply into the bag, you couldn't see it at all. So it went from a bag that seems to have been used many, many times at her feet, now to a bag that is perfectly straight, and you can see into it and see, in fact, that maybe she has a dog at home. When we start to think about a dog at home, now this world of possibility and companionship has been opened up, right? So all of these little details become really important. Angela was mentioning it looks like she took a shower and changed clothes. She combed her hair. It's like a new day, right? So this wig that, that the artist Dwayne Hansen chose, certainly would have gotten a good deal more attention if it was worn by a human, which was its original intention. As an artwork in a gallery, we take as good care as we possibly can, but certainly everybody needs a little spa day every so often, and that's what happened here. Laura,
we've already seen a manicure, and now we're seeing, going to the hair parlor. So.
Yes. What do you want to add about the material of the skin or any of the treatment that you're familiar with?
Yeah, so the wig is the one that I love looking at first. It's the first thing I noticed, and people always think about conservators actually being with the term on the bench, right, where they're physically working on the artwork, but there's a lot that goes into it, right? As Elizabeth mentioned, the huge documentation, seeing exactly what's in the bag and taking each thing out and noticing, and then doing examinations, right? So they actually took x-rays of her head to see the wig, right? They're not going to just take it off, and they saw that it was actually, it's nailed in there. So when you see the x-ray of her, it's pretty crazy
it's
looking.
terrifying.
All the nails knocked in there, but it does need to get a primping. And what's really interesting in the conservation treatment of this is the balance of bringing it back to the artist's original intent, but the fact that the artist wanted her to not look like super pristine from the get-go, right? She was meant to look like an ordinary person. And so it's definitely this interesting balance. Some of the things I would mention is you were wondering about some of those paper goods on the table, those magazines and the papers. Those that you see in the after are actually exhibition copies because they were so fragile. They were actually found, some of the materials he did not create for this piece. He got them as found objects that he purchased for this artwork. So they actually was like that National Enquirer is that Enquirer from decades ago. So it's resting in the lab. So a few of the really, really not damaged, some of the materials did get so damaged that they had to put on replacements, but other times they just needed to rest them in the lab.
And there's this great question Casey has posed about how do you preserve the original intent? So in the case of this this particular artwork, as Laura said, rather than just diving right in and let's start cleaning off her skin and let's give her the best hairdo possible, the conservator who did this work spent a lot of time doing research. So looking back, how do you find a photograph? It happens that there's a photograph of the artist sitting across the table from this artwork. So it's really wonderful to see him and his work in the same picture and feel confident that it is likely that the way it's presented in the photograph with the artist is probably the way he intended it to be. So that's really wonderful. But in the absence of that, what kind of research do you have to do to fill in your gaps of understanding? How do you know that you know enough to make an informed choice? And how do you also preserve the artist's original intention? And so this is that kind of ethical balancing act that Laura was mentioning previously.
And because this is made out of primarily plastic and found materials, it's very, very difficult because plastic is not known for aging very gracefully, and it can actually be, toxic if not treated carefully. So this piece is a really challenging one, which is why we love talking about it.
Yeah, and it inspires such great stories, which I think is really fun too.
And we should probably mention, because they can't see it in person, this is life size, so it's very arresting to see in the galleries.
Yes. So while we're in this moment of kind of thinking about how visually arresting the artwork is, how many parts of it are designed to be disposable, right? So a newspaper is not designed to be forever, and so the conservators needed to come in with more stable papers. When we're starting to think about the distinction between just dirty enough to honor Dwayne Hanson's intention that she looks like a regular person, but not so dirty to tell the story of sadness and sort of depravity that we were telling before. What new ideas or questions do you have about that ethical balancing act? And this is intentionally a wide open question so that you can just start to apply some of this thinking to your own either practice or digging into the ethics. So in the chat box, what new ethical considerations, questions, quandaries does this before and after expose for you? We've got some great questions going in the chat box. What's it called? It's called Women Eating. It's by Dwayne Hanson. And the year, if I'm remembering correctly, is 1970. I don't have that in my notes. Do you happen to know?
71.
71.
And someone did ask if we contact the artist. Conservators love to contact the artist when that's available. For instance, Dwayne Hanson passed away in the 90s. This particular treatment that Elizabeth's showing you was done, I believe, in 2015. So that's why when we're talking about documentation, it's so important. And with a lot of contemporary artists, our conservators are being trained to do artist interviews in order to have this documentation straight from the artist's mouth. Of course, artists aren't necessarily going to give you their preservation methods, but knowing exactly how they made the artwork and what their intent is so important.
Mm-hmm. And that's a theme that's coming up a lot in the chat box, this question of intent, knowing what is the material, knowing how much to clean. Kimberly's adding in, it's very important to consider the artist's intent. Many times you cannot or should not assume. As you can see, these small details can lead to misunderstanding. And I like this line, prudence and minimal intervention. Kara is asking about the boundary that the conservator needs to walk in order to discover whether or not the work is appropriate. And David is building into this idea also, the presentation of women in our times. And so thinking also about the identity of the artist. Beautiful, I love this. This is good thinking. So as we continue to dig into this, we're gonna introduce a new artwork. Laura, what do you want us to know?
So looking at this is a different artist that we're turning to. His name is Frederick Eversley, or he likes to be known as more Fred Eversley. So this is the artist pictured himself with one of his artworks. But let's go into the next slide a little bit. I want us, again, you just saw him and looking, you know that he does sculptures. I want us to look at this sculpture here. Again, we're not going to give you much information. Just tell us exactly what you're noticing in this photograph of this sculpture right here.
I am being a bossy person and I'm saying try to note 10 things.
Okay, so concentric circles. Soft lighting assumes some sort of rounding or concavity. Yep. Gradation, light at the end of the tunnel, shadows. All right. Monochromatic, a sphere, minimalist, sphere, well balanced, orb, faded sun through a scrim. Okay. That there's a base. Great.
Good.
What else are you guys noticing? You're wondering if it's on a base or if that's part of it. Excellent. So you're starting to try and realize, you know, is this center part, is the orb the entire sculpture, or is the base part of it? the contrast. You're asking if it's three-dimensional, that it has weight to it, and that the sphere has an opening. All right. I mean, I think we listed standing still.
Kimberly's got us covered.
Great, great, excellent. All right, see, you saw a lot for a pretty minimal piece here, right? With the woman eating, you saw a lot, and there was a ton, and this is very minimal. So in looking at this, you're noticing a lot of really key points here. So this is an orb, so you're noticing that. I like how someone up here, there's been so many, mentioned that, oh, Ms. Long mentioned that there's feels heavy. I will reveal this piece is very heavy. It's cast out of resin. So again, it's a different type of plastic, but it is perfectly cast in it. Maybe we can show the next slide. I wanted them to see what, this is another picture of Fred Eversley with a different one. This is not the same one. The one in our collection, the one that was black, is called Untitled, but he is really, really known for creating these orbs, right? These spheres. What's really interesting about them, someone said it said standing still. These are kind of pieces, these big masses. However, the play of light is really, really important in this piece, in his pieces in general. And I just wanted to, and then we'll turn back to the other one, just read out the artist's intention here is how, while he creates these orbs, he creates kinetic or moving sculptures in the way that the visitor interacts with it, right? So by moving and seeing how the light shifts and seeing the different perspectives, it almost becomes a moving sculpture on its own. So I just wanted to show you this, but we can go back one slide above.
See if
Unless
unless
it doesn't want to.
There we go.
Perfect. Okay. Great. So yes, this is called Untitled by Fred Eversley. And this is an earlier work of his. He's a really interesting artist. This was done in 1974. And he's actually a trained engineer who worked at NASA. So he was very interested in space and engineering. And then he wound up moving to LA and wound up helping out a lot of artists figure out some engineering issues. And then he wound up, it's really interesting, he got in this horrific car accident, and during that time he couldn't work, so he wound up taking that pause time and started creating his own art, and then basically didn't look back and went full into art. But the engineering always played a really important part. So he actually casts these resin sculptures using a centrifuge, which is why they're so round. And what's crazy about it is you notice that there's the play of light. So this area, can you actually hover your mouse over the inner part? That part there, it almost looks see-through, but it's not. It just goes concave so close that light actually comes through it. And I will say that this artwork is so delicate because it's so concave that it scratches incredibly easily. Okay, so great. Elizabeth, thank you for putting in all that information in there. So let's go to the next slide and think about this. Sorry, 2 slides. So someone had mentioned,
sorry.
That's okay. Someone had mentioned is the base part of it. The base is not part of it. And the fact that
Sorry, I don't know what's happening.
Perfect. The fact that only one of you guys mentioned that there's a base is a good thing. Part of Eversley's artistic vision is that you have this clear view and you can interact with the artwork, not physically touch it, but experience it, where you get this entire sphere and you can move it. So you almost want the base to disappear, right? Because the base is not part of the artwork. What concerns might we have about having a perfectly round sphere on display in an art museum where they would not want to have any vitrine because that goes against the artistic vision? Rolling off the stand, movement and touch, absolutely. And again, as I mentioned, this resin surface is so delicate that it scratches very easily. So this piece had just had a major treatment done to really make sure everything worked. And then we're looking here at just an excerpt of what this documentation looks like. So this is a conservation examination report. And you can see we have at the top tombstone information. Then we have the history, right? Because different conservators have worked on this piece. So a little bit of background about who Eversley was. Then it gives a physical description of this artwork so you can help locate it. We have an image of it, the treatment history, and then display recommendations. Unfortunately, what happened after the major conservation treatment, it was put back on view. And if you can, it's kind of hard to read, but if you read it, they found it and it actually had come off the base. So for us, it's been very challenging to figure out a better way to secure this sculpture while maintaining the artistic vision for people to enjoy it as this whole piece. So we have a challenge for you. Remember, we asked you guys to bring something round. Yes, you need to figure out the physics, exactly. And someone was asking too about how we figure out the boundary of making these decisions. It's really important to mention that we in the conservation lab don't work in a bubble. I mean, we physically work in a bubble because our labs are encased in glass, but in order to make these ethical decisions, conservators work with the registrars who take care of the artwork, the exhibition team who's thinking about how best to have the visitors interact, the curators, the artist studio when possible. For example, Eversley is still alive to this day, so we are able to have conversations with him. So there's a lot to figure out the boundaries for each particular artwork. So yeah, so you guys are already starting to think about designing and how you do it. So our challenge, you want to go to the next slide, is for you guys to, you can have your own Eversley. For me, that's a roll of tape, but it can be anything that basically, when you put it this way, is not steady on its own. And you can try one or more ways to prototype a display solution. So you can either create one with materials that you have, you could sketch it out, or you could write your recommendations, kind of continuing on with this excerpt that we had in the conservation report. Or you could try multiple. You could do some sketching and creating. You could do some writing. So we're going to give you guys a little bit of time. Like, what do you think?
We're doing great on time. Why don't we do 8 minutes and then check in and see if anybody needs some more time. I'm going to put some really snazzy music on my phone, and that can be our timer. Before we turn you loose, does anyone have any questions about this task or need a reminder about any of the code of ethics components or any of the kind of constraints and guidelines that conservators are working within?
And keep in mind, as you're working, if you don't have a question yet, we will be on the chat box and can be responding throughout the time.
Yes. Right. It looks like everybody's ready. All right. See you in 8 minutes. All right. Does anyone need extra time? I'm going to do a 5-second countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So before we go into what solutions the conservators in the Lunder Conservation Center came up with and the questions they were asking themselves, if any of you feel like sharing your solution, we will happily take your name in the chat box and enable your camera, and you can hold up your solution to the camera and explain how you came up with the idea that you did. And
just keeping in mind, this is recorded, so as long as you're comfortable with that.
Oh, thank you for that reminder. That's a really good point. Is anyone willing to share their thinking? Ooh, all right. Love it. I'm bringing your video on.
I think you'll have to, once you do that, Elizabeth, you'll just have to accept it.
Yeah. Let's see if it works.
And we'll unmute her as well.
Okay, great. You got it. All right, we're ready for you.
Do you want to share your screen temporarily so we can see?
Oh, thank you. Yes, of course. Did that work? Maybe not.
Nope.
Trapped.
Oh, but I think I can do it. There you go.
Yes.
Yay, okay.
I was thinking I have a nail, little screw on my cup into the base, coming through, spinning, suspending.
Ooh, I love. You really embrace the kinetic component of the artwork. Love it. Thank you. Anybody willing to add a new solution to the docket? Just need to drop your name in the chat box. I thank you for being a bold leader. I appreciate that. Ooh, Deborah, you were doing a drawing. You're not sure that the drawing will show up, but one was a clear resin base with a depression and lips on the side to hold the sphere, but also enables viewers to see the whole thing. And the other was suspended in a very strong, clear netting made from fishing line. Fantastic. So suspension would be a really amazing alternative. Very different from the solutions I've seen in the past. Anybody else willing to share their solution? Back in the list, Manian, I think, said a vacuum. I love that idea. So something that like holds it down against the base. Okay. Anything more? One solution that was offered was laying it down on its side. Clear suspension strips. A classic base shape, sides that curve outward, and a strong, clear plastic sling. So it seems like a cradle is kind of a solution that people are coming back to again. Casey, are you willing to share your drawing? That would be great. Let me see if I can find you in our list. I'm going to ask you to start the video.
Oh, I don't know if it will show. So I did mine with magnets. So I put a giant magnet on the bottom and then right here so it could float on the pedestal. So you could still have that, you know, I thought that would be an interesting way to show it.
So you're using the repelling sides of the magnet.
Yes.
Ah, fantastic. Very cool. Do we have a last brave sharer? Thank you, Casey, I appreciate it.
Yes, no worries.
Sujin, thank you so much. You're going to be our anchor. We'll find you in the list.
Okay, so what I did was it's just a cup, a paper cup, and then I took a paper clip, and it looks like this, the paper clip, and then you can just balance the Aleve cap on top of it. Yes.
I love it.
Of course, it's got to be a really strong paper clip.
Yes.
And it can stay balanced or whatever. And I just use tape to, that's all.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's awesome. All right, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. I love having these folks who are willing to jump in. Yay. And I'm so delighted that I managed not to lose everybody with my technologizing.
And this is a great challenge because we actually don't have a solution for this. So we have sported a few different possible ones. And if you want to go into the next slide. So the one that you might have seen this picture, this is for signing up. One solution they were positing was encasing the entire perimeter it's actually the same type of resin, which is the same material as if you've ever had theater lights or that same resin, and getting the color perfectly to match and cutting it so it's the exact same outline as the perimeter, because there actually are some nuances because it is done by hand even though it's with a centrifuge. So encasing that whole perimeter and then having it be on, how it's righted up, how it's supposed to be, and anchored onto this stronger support So that basically it's like that brace that many of you guys were noticing, that it can be not just nestled, but it can be braced. Very clever idea. So our frames conservator is also all of the exhibition, all of the mounts. So he worked really closely with our objects conservators and our technicians. The problem was, when talking with the curators, they determined that you are still covering a lot of the sculpture. So even though it looks exactly like the sculpture, they didn't feel like it was true enough to the artistic vision. So they didn't go with that idea. Oh, someone else had mentioned and explained what you would do. You'd build a base with a small concave part to set it with minimal contact, but giving it support. Right. So the big concern for us is that as long as the support, it can't block even the smallest part on the bottom, because again, in talking to Eversley Studios, really important that they see the entire part. So I think what you guys have, a lot of solutions are really interesting of having those support, but maybe it being clear, or something like that, so you can still have that. Our objects conservator next wants to look into suction cups as a base, but she is concerned right now that because suction cups are made out of like a plastic material, that it might over time leave some sort of resin or film on the surface. So she doesn't yet feel like suction technology is there yet. So we like to do this. We report back to our conservators to share the ideas and see what might happen, because right now, sadly, this sculpture is still in storage because we have not come up with a great, safe way to display this and be true to the artistic vision. So thanks for all of your ideas for it. And if you continue to have them, maybe this goes really well into our next slide. Oh, well, the final slide where it says, please let me, you can
keep noodling, keep noodling. The invitation is open. Before we get to the very final closing, I just want to give you a little bit of space to distill your thinking. So we've gone through all of this together. We dug into the code of ethics, the kind of considerations that conservators are holding in mind as they do their work so carefully, as they research, et cetera, et cetera. We looked at the impact of tiny details and really dug around in the idea that it's important to be cautious and to be as minimally intrusive or invasive as possible. And then you tried your hand at actually solving this problem and perhaps discovered something through that whole process. So when you sew all of those parts together and you look back on your thinking, what new criteria for informed decisions do you have? Or which of your existing criteria have been reinforced? That would be one method of reflection. Or alternatively, what new ideas do you have about the role of ethics and the role ethics can play in our everyday lives? Will you just spend 1 minute of my silence and Laura's silence just kind of distilling your thinking on one of those 2 points and put your thinking in the chat box?
That's a wonderful thought, David.
I put a timer on because I usually want so badly to get back in conversation that I can't stop myself. So Sarah's reflecting on team effort, and I really appreciate that connects with what Laura was talking about at the start, that conservators aren't working in isolation, that they're talking to one another. We recognize in design thinking, in the maker movement mentality, that diffuse knowledge is a valuable asset. So sharing knowledge rather than feeling like you own it and hold it close is an opportunity to iterate rapidly. Exploring ways how art can be preserved for future generations. So thinking about the impact that our choices today have on the future, and thinking about things having longevity is a really powerful connection there, which I think connects to, at least in my mind, to what David said at the top about embracing diversity, and also thinking more inclusively when we recognize that things have duration, that the actions we take now color or change the way people think in the future. It's a really important consideration. So we have the idea also, when you're starting a new piece of art, research the material. So if you're an artist and you're choosing a material that has a shelf life of 25 years, you've just made your artwork have a shelf life, which is a really interesting point of consideration. What ideas are jumping out?
I will say that conservators won't, they would never put those constraints on an artist, right? Say like, yes, it would make their job easier, but conservators are always up for a challenge, and not all artwork is meant to have the same lifespan. So it's really about that preserving it. Some artwork is made not to last. That is part of its intent. So the conservator's job would never be to tell an artist no, just like an artist might give feedback on how it can or should be preserved or be experienced, but it's ultimately up to the museum and the ethical considerations to come up with what's best in that particular environment.
Beautiful. So thinking about Andy Goldsworthy is an example of that. And so some of the other trends that I see really coming through strongly in the chat box have to do with knowing what the artist's intention was and really valuing that, which is fantastic. And not compartmentalizing, but rather thinking diffusely. So when we go back to that three-legged stool, it's really important that the conservators not have a single deep expertise, but rather three deep expertises, and recognizing that how those are intertwined is a really powerful tool for doing their job. Okay, so back to that invitation to share ideas. So if at 2 o'clock in the morning you wake up with a brilliant solution to the Eversley problem, we wanted to make sure that you had our contact information, which you'll see on the slide here. We were going to also let you know that we at SAM have an online teacher institute this summer, and we'll circulate more information about that, but just to know that that'll be an opportunity to hear from educators from across the Smithsonian. So we're in conversation with educators at American History, at the Portrait Gallery, at African American History and Culture, and other orgs to kind of collaborate and do what is almost impossible to do in real life by bringing lots and lots of people together to learn from lots and lots of museums. Anything that you want to share, Laura, before we?
Yes, and the blue box, you'll say, we really want to know, we want feedback, how this workshop has been going. This is our first time, the two of us together collaborating to offer an online program. We would love to offer more programs. We'd love to offer digital resources, and we really want them to be good for you guys. So please, please, please fill out our online survey. I just put the link in the chat box. We'll also be emailing you a link right after this. So please give us any and all feedback.